Okay. All righty. So that was just an introduction. One of the things I would like for y'all to get out of that is, though, that there are so many things that determine whether, they're going to choose your company or they're going to choose another company. And if you are after a certain target group, you can sort of hone in on some of those things that they have in common. And then that's the things you're going to want to capitalize on. And really, I can give y'all like a uh, um, real life example of this. For instance, y'all know I love trucks. And so a lot of times the examples I give you kind of bring it home to you more on something that you might actually do. So I want to give you two examples. One of them is they looked at a bunch of different factors for, what makes someone choose what they choose. Some of the factors were economic reasons. There were social reasons. There were all kinds of things. But every one of you, believe it or not, goes through a series of things, a series of decisions in your mind when you're opting to purchase something. But you're not thinking to yourself, okay, I can't do this because, and I can't do that because, but my family influences me or whatever. But all of it is part of a process that just comes very, very natural to you. It's a learned process over the years on how you make decisions. And whether you are looking at something major to purchase or maybe just something that doesn't require that much involvement, which we'll get into in a little bit. But let's look, for instance, at how a difference can be made when you're looking to make a big purchase just by how it's presented to the person who's doing the purchasing. Now, for me, it wouldn't make a difference, but for other people, it would if you're kind of on the fence on what you want. Well, let's look at buying a new vehicle. And your poor old car has just died and you just don't want to put any more money into it. So you pull your funds together and you think, okay, what can I afford? And maybe I can afford a Ford Escape. I don't even know if they still make those or not. They were around $20,000. So would be something that you could afford on a monthly basis. So you've done your research, you figured out that particular vehicle would do what you need. It'll get you to and from work, to and from school. It won't cost you $200 every time you pull up to the gas tank. All these things that are part of the process of deciding on a new car, but you're not thinking to yourself, okay, what are my social reasons for getting this? What are my, family reasons? It's just part of the process that you go through. So let's say, for instance, when I bought my truck, I looked around and I thought, first off, I didn't think, well, do I want a Chevrolet? Do I want a Nissan? Do I want a Toyota? What do I, or, a Dodge Ram, what I want. I didn't have to think about it. I knew I wanted a Ford, period. And there wouldn't be anything in the world that anybody could have said to me that would have made me go buy something other than a Ford. But I have what you call brand loyalty. And so I knew exactly what I wanted, and I knew that I wanted a pickup and that I wanted it to be the Raptor. And so when I called the guy, I said, okay, I want a black Ford Raptor. And he said, well, I have this on the lot. I said, I don't care what you have on the lot. This is what I want. He said, well, I can give you a good break on this one. I don't care. I want a black Ford Raptor. So, for me, it doesn't do much good. Salespeople really don't have much luck with me because if I make up my mind, I know what I want, and that's what I want. However, if you're sitting on the fence and you go into a dealership and you tell them, my budget is that I can afford a Ford Escape, and I just want the, manual transmission. I want, windows that roll up instead of electric or whatever it happens to be. All the choices you can make. Although I don't know if they make manual windows anymore. And the salesperson sees and thinks, well, I wonder if I can upsell them a little bit. So what they do is they'll say, well, we don't really have a bottom of the line Ford Escape. However, we have this one that has, an automatic transmission and it's got a little wind scoop on the back and, it's got little bells and whistles on it that will only cost you, and they'll put it in terms of the lease about, $20 more a month, let's say. And so you're thinking, well, that's not bad because what they're telling you is it's going to cost you $20 more a month. But in reality, what you're not thinking of that's actually, $240 a year, which is more substantial if you think of it that way, or whatever it is, 244, whatever it is. And so they manage to upsell people that way. And when you go and you go ahead and purchase it, and it's more than what you can afford because you know exactly what you could afford. But as the person who is trying to sell a product or a service, you want to capitalize on what the people that are considering your service, what's important to them. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. But the main thing is to know your target group. So, and you need to know your competition. If you are hired by one of the local hospitals to advertise and market their HMO, for instance, then you need to look at all the other HMOs that are out there because you need to know what their strengths are so that you can capitalize on their weaknesses. If you know their strengths, their weaknesses, you can capitalize on their weaknesses and offer a product that they don't offer. It won't do you much good if you compete with the same strengths that they have, particularly if they're already in a business. Like, for instance, you have a huge company like, I know that I think it's Mary Kay has a huge company in Torrance or somewhere, and they have when they decide on an HMO or Toyota, any of these big industries, then they look at a lot of things. They look at what's it going to cost the company, and they look at what their uh, workers are going to most likely need, and they look at the workforce. Do they have a lot of people between the ages of 22 and 40, or do they have more between the ages of 40 and 60 or whatever it happens to be? So you need to have that information also because you need to capitalize on what's going to be most important to that company and to their employees. So you learn this by looking at consumer behavior, at all the things that go into it, and what their employees would learn in your target groups. What would their employees find important? It is highly unlikely that someone that is working in a blue collar job and that is in their early 20s is going to be real concerned about retirement benefits or real concerned about other types of tests and stuff that medical tests that don't begin until you're, later on. So you need to look at the workforce and find out, so that you know what you can attempt to market to these groups. So knowing about consumer behavior is extremely important. So we're going to talk about uh, consumer behavior on this chapter. We're going to hit the high points. And then, like I said, after we do that, we'll just have an introduction to chapter 3, which is the marketing environment, which is relatively easy. And then we're going to have a little group time together. So far, any questions? Or any questions on anything that you came into class wanting to know? All your stuff is graded. Most of you did a really nice job on, I thought it was, some of the things were very interesting. So, that y'all turned in. So anyway, let's see what we're going to look on this consumer behavior now. And where are you at? There you are. Okay. Maybe. Where are you? I know you're here. Hang on. Oh, man, I got to get to the front of the road here. Hmm. Okay, buyer behavior. Let's get 'em. I gotta try to keep up with this stuff. Okay. Come on, why aren't you working? All righty. When you're looking at buyer behavior, and I really can't emphasize enough how important this is when you're in marketing. You have to know what your target group is looking for. If you don't, you'll spend countless amounts of money trying to figure it out. So you need to know what is important, and that's what you need to capitalize on. So you need to understand the process of how consumers make decisions and how industrial businesses make decisions. You need to recognize that both internal and external factors, and we'll talk about that in a minute, influence consumer decision making, things that you don't even realize that that's what you're doing, but you're subconsciously doing it, as are your customers. Then you need to identify alternative strategies that might affect consumer decision making, and then appreciate the different nature of organizational buying and its implications for you. Okay, I don't know how many of you, and I use this example a lot because it's such a great example for marketing, but Shark Tank. If you watch Shark Tank, every single time someone comes up there with a product, they'll say, well, this definitely solves a problem. Or they'll say, well, this really doesn't solve a problem. It's just kind of, gimmicky, or it might be faddish. Most of the times, they are not going to invest in something that they don't believe solves any kind of problem, because the livelihood of that kind of a product or service is usually very short. People move on to the next gimmicky thing. So what you have to do in the consumer decision making process is recognize the problem. Now, what you think is a problem, your consumer may not necessarily think is a problem. What people view as problems differs, and that can be related to, economic reasons, cultural reasons, social reasons. There's all kinds of reasons why somebody might view something as a problem when somebody else would not view it as a problem at all. I can tell you this, it's just, and it can do with, where you're raised at, whether you're raised in the South or you're raised in the North or raised here in California. It all makes a difference. I've told y'all that I don't mind y'all texting me or calling me anytime. I'm happy to do it. Other, instructors might consider that a problem. So if I was looking for answers to that type of problem, I wouldn't care. I don't need an answer to that. I'm fine with it. But someone else might consider it a real problem. So just take it down and look at it. Something that you might consider a real issue, but it doesn't bother your friend at all. And you wonder, why doesn't this bug them like it does me? So again, it has to do with your target group and with individual ways of looking at things. So when you're looking at a problem recognition, then you're looking at when the consumer perceives a difference between the desired and the actual state. So they may desire something, but what the reality of it is, it's not happening. So when you have that conflict, then you try to come up with a way to solve it, which would be you'd recognize that this is a problem. Now, how can we fix it? For example, difficulty in getting an appointment with primary care. So if you have problems getting an appointment with your primary care physician, a lot of things will go into whether or not you wish to keep that primary care physician or whether you just don't care. You just have a sore throat and you want some antibiotics or whatever it happens to be. So you might be an alternative. Would you just seek another physician? If you can't get an appointment, then say, oh, well, I don't care. I'll find another one. Now, when you go to start looking for another one, you might see ads or you might see marketing campaigns, and they may have long lines of people waiting to get in to see someone or waiting for an appointment or whatever it happens to be, being put on hold, and you've got a picture of a telephone operator and all these blinking things around them with people waiting to talk to them. And the implication is that is the receptionist who makes the the appointments, and you're thinking, oh, I sure don't want to deal with that. Whereas you might also see someone that it's all done by computer. And you go on there and you see a calendar and you click on what you want and you're done. So again, that's you looking for a way to solve the problem that you currently have. Now, an internal search would be you recognize the problem, and so you go and you seek a solution to it. So you try to remember if there's other primary care physicians that you know about that, and you try to find an appointment with them. Now, if you have no brand loyalty, then it's not any different than just deciding that you're going to switch from, Colgate to Crest because it's on sale or whatever it happens to be. There's no real deal in it because all you're doing is going in because you have a sore throat or whatever it happens to be. However, the upside of that for the new primary care is that if you like them, you'll switch over to them. And so the original one has lost your business because you can't get an appointment, but the new one is getting you because you just needed an appointment quickly. They filled a need for you. And you probably, if you liked it, you're likely to go back. So that's when you're just looking around to yourself and thinking, who else could I go to? Who else do I know? It's an internal search. Now, the external search is more when you're seeking information on sources that you don't know yourself internally, or you don't know about the group you're currently using. So this would be, there's a lot of ways people go to look for information. When you decide on where you want to eat one night at night, and there's a bunch of restaurants, and you don't have any idea what you want to do, most of us go straight to Yelp and see, okay, boy, this one looks interesting. Oh, they have a 1 with 100 ratings. I don't believe I'll go there. And oh, they have a bad health rating, or whatever it happens to be. So those reviews are very costly to businesses. So but it's the same thing with medical care. What you're going to do is you're going to go look. Well, Yelp does also review physicians. They review hospitals. They review medical equipment. So you can find a lot of information on Yelp if you're looking for a new primary care, or you're looking for a new plastic surgeon, or whatever it happens to be. However, there are other services that are specifically for healthcare, such as one called Healthgrades. And that's just one of many that specifically reviews various types of medical facilities, medical providers, the whole works. So that's when you start your external search, is when you start looking. And if you have no idea, then you start with reviews, most people. And after that, then you think about what are the critical issues? For instance, what are the benefits relative to the cost? How long is it going to take you to look for somebody? Maybe they're going to recommend somebody that's in Arizona instead of California. What are the benefits to what you're finding during this external search? Also, for instance, the example the book talks about is that an expectant mother, and she only looks every few days. Well, she's looking for, a doctor to deliver her baby, she's getting more and more pregnant every day. So, she doesn't have the luxury of continuing to hunt and decide and interview, because it's a lot of time constraint there. So you have to decide if it's worth it to you, or, where else do you go? Another place a person goes when they're looking for a new physician, or some surgeon or something along those lines, is to people they know who have had it done. Maybe you had a friend that just had a baby, and they told you, man, they just really loved, their doctor and the hospital they went to and the whole 9 yards. So you're going to be likely to maybe at least put that person at the top of your list. But if they said to you, oh, it was the most horrible experience of my life, the doctor didn't get there till after the nurse had already delivered the baby, and, I always had to wait for appointments, blah, 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 that person is more than likely going to go to the bottom of your list. So when you're doing an external search, you're using every kind of resource that you have, to figure it out. Now, when you're looking at locus of control, that's when you have people have they have more control and the outcomes require more from them. For instance, if if you're a patient that has a chronic health issue like diabetes or something that's going to require long-term care, you're going to be more likely to be very, very diligent in your efforts in your external search. You're going to look at a lot of different factors. If you need to have heart surgery, you're going to, not going to want to go to a discount heart surgeon. You're going to want to go to one that has great ratings, has, doesn't have medical malpractice suits against them, all these different things. Particularly if you're looking for someone that you're going to be under their care for an extended period of time. So a lot of these things come into play. You also, part of the thing that helps you make a decision on how diligent you are in your efforts is perceived risks. If there's not a lot of risk involved, then you're probably not going to take as much time or effort to select the new facility or the new doctor. So they give you 5 levels of risk. One of them is performance risk. And what that is that the product does not do what it's supposed to do. So it's an ineffective drug. Now, let me give you an example of that. Let's say that you're 100 pounds overweight and everyone's been telling you that you need to take one of those drugs for diabetes, like Ozempic or Wegovy or one of those. Okay, your insurance doesn't pay for it. And so you have to decide, is it going to be that effective for you? And is it going to maybe have a detrimental effect? So your performance risk is, do I want to spend the money? Is it going to really help me lose 100 pounds and I can continue to eat hot fudge sundaes, or whatever it happens to be? The financial risk is it worth what it's going to cost me? Or can I just get stronger arms? My mom had a doctor one time tell her that she just needs to strengthen her arms. And she looked at him kind of funny and he said, you need to push away from the table. And so, so you look at it financially, is it worth $1,000 a month to me when maybe I could just have more discipline and stop the eating myself? Now, that doesn't necessarily, not everybody can do that. A lot of people don't have that kind of willpower, especially when you really love to eat and you really love, good, rich food, lots of butter and, all that kind of thing. So, they feel like it's worth $1,000 to them because that's supposedly the easy way. Now, then there's the social risk. What are others going to think about you for doing that? Social risk comes into play, not so much in California or in today's world, but in Texas, I probably didn't know a handful of people that had, liposuction or that had plastic surgery or any of those things. When I came to California, I was kind of in culture shock because it seemed like to me a lot of people had plastic surgeons on speed dial. I think maybe it's just Southern California and so much emphasis because of all the, movies and actors and all those kind of things. But it's a pretty known fact. There's been research done on it that socially, it's not as unacceptable as it may be in other areas. So let's look at looking at the social risk of taking medication like Wegovy or Ozempic. So all of a sudden, you don't tell anybody, and all of a sudden, you're like 20 pounds lighter in a couple of months. Are you going to tell your friends and maybe maybe not necessarily your friends, but your acquaintances that you're taking Ozempic shots or whatever it happens to be? Are you going to kind of keep that to yourself? Do you feel there's a social stigma attached to some types of drugs or some types of surgery? So that's another factor that people look at. And then they look at the physiological, could harm actually occur. If you go and you look at the side effects of some of these drugs, it's really kind of scary, so people have to really weigh it as to, is this, if they're so overweight that it's affecting their health, is it worth taking that chance? So that's another one of the perceived or actual risks that are involved in some of these decisions. And then there's the psychological risk. How do you feel about the fact that you're having to get an aid basically to lose weight, that you can't do it on your own? So these are some of the things that go into the decision-making process. And a lot of it is subconscious, which, it's hard to imagine, but that you go through all these thoughts to make these decisions. All right, 1 second. I want to be sure I don't miss anything that might help y'all remember. Okay. So marketing, what you're doing with marketing is you're attempting to influence the desired state by trying to alter the perception of the existing state. In other words, you're trying to alter what someone is thinking by showing long lines at the competitor. Not that that's a particular ethical way to do it, but there are some companies that do it. But they don't state the name. They'll just show this. These are on. I'm sure you've seen them on TV. Is this what you want to face every time you go to the doctor? And then you see all these long lines, or you see, all kinds of various things. The humorous ones have various ways to subconsciously make you think that you're better off with their company without naming anyone in particular. Again, just to reiterate, the internal search is when you try to remember other physicians. Some of this may be on your quizzes. The external search is when you go for other sources like Yelp or like friends or news reports, consumer reports, all of those ways that you can kind of try to figure it out. And then there's also a company that is called WellPoint that actually similar to the Zagat reviews of restaurants. It actually reviews and rates doctors. And that's just a few of the ones that the book talked about. Okay. Let's see. They're talking about cognitive dissonance, which is this occurs after the sale. When you buy something, let's say, for instance, you went into that car dealership and you bought that car that you really couldn't afford. So you get it home and you're like, oh, why did I do that? Now I've got to suffer for the next 6 years or however long the notice, paying for a vehicle I don't love that much, but it's over what I can afford to pay. Am I gonna have to get another job, or am I gonna have to let the car go back and ruin my credit? But cognitive dissonance is what happens after your sale. Buyer's remorse is what it boils down to. Did I really need to do this? This happens a lot when people go to places like buying timeshares. They offer you, oh, we'll give you a free TV if you'll just come listen to our spill on the whatever it happens to be, a timeshare, let's say. And so you go, and then they have so many levels of people trying to sell it to you that by the time before you leave, they've convinced you to buy a timeshare you had absolutely no intention of buying and probably couldn't afford. The next day, you more than likely are suffering from cognitive dissonance. And how are you going to get out of this? So a lot of times when you purchase big items, you do suffer that. Sometimes it's not too bad. You just think, well, I like it. I'm glad I did it. Other times you're very sorry that you did it. So the next thing you look at is the decision freedom. So what are your choices? What can we do about it? Okay. 1 second here. Now, I'm going to back up for just a minute. The computer's got a mind of its own as usual. When you're looking at consumer decision models. The compensatory model is choosing from many alternatives and selecting among several, pediatricians. Pediatricians, when you're pregnant and most of the time you have to choose a pediatrician because they usually have them either in the delivery room or coming shortly thereafter. So it's a huge decision. This is your baby, literally, that you're talking about. So you have all these different possibilities, and then you have to select one of them. And you can look at a lot of different reasons that help you make that decision. For instance, there's trade attributes, and those are things like, what are their office hours? Where are they located? If the pediatrician you really love is 60 miles away and you have an infant and two more at home, then you're probably, even though you really love him, you probably are not going to choose him or her. If you find one that is open, like I was told y'all, I think about in this class about the one in Tampa that is open Thursday through Monday and closed on Tuesday and Wednesday or keep very short hours, but they have full office hours on Saturday and Sunday. For people that work full time, that's a huge benefit. That can swing who you decide on as being your pediatrician. And then the non-compensatory are based on one attribute regardless of the other attributes. There's one thing that you want and the other stuff isn't as important to you, so you make your decision based on that one thing. That one thing could be that they need to be located within 3 blocks of your house, or they need to offer office hours on Saturday. For me, it might be, do they have parking? Because parking, I find that to be one of the most irritating things there is in California is lack of parking. And, on a daily basis, people have to fight for parking. And I fight for parking on campus. I fight for parking, just about everywhere that you go, you're fighting for parking. When I got ready to move here a while back, the one thing was that I wanted a parking in a garage, in a condo that had a garage underneath. And I really wasn't that interested. As long as I could afford it and had a garage, then that was my main factor. I mean, I didn't want to be off 100 miles away or anything, but that was one of the main decision makers for me because I hate looking for parking. I hate it. In Texas, you rarely have to fight for parking unless you're in a downtown area wanting to go to a concert or something. But for the most part, it's big state, a lot of spaces, a lot of space. So you don't have a daily fight for parking. So other people have other things that are really important to them. So that's the non-compensatory model. It's like, I am not choosing this person if they don't have this attribute. Okay, again, cognizance dissonance occurs when a choice is made and you have second thoughts. It's by remorse. And we all have suffered it. It doesn't matter who you are. Sometimes I'll stomp around and think, I can't believe I bought that. And there's not a lot you can do about it. And hopefully you just don't do it on something that's really huge, Like when you make those huge decisions, hopefully you know exactly what you want. And if you can afford it so you don't suffer the cognitive dissonance. And then again, decision freedom is consumers are happier if they have more choices to make. Okay. Let's see, it's 8:05. Let me hang on. Move along. Now, this is really important because depending on what service you're selling or what company you work for, whatever it happens to be, there's different types of involvement in decision making. Every single day, every one of us makes some kind of low involvement decision. An example of a low involvement decision, let's say that you're standing in line at, I don't know who has horrible eyes, Target. and you've got all your stuff in your little buggy, and you get up to the front, and you're almost at the checkout. You're right in front of the candy and all that kind of stuff to your left that they put there to tempt you while you're starving to death and waiting to get your checked out. And all of a sudden, you remember that you needed aspirin. So you look on that little counter that's right next to you, and of course, you see their brand aspirin. You don't see Advil or you don't see any Bayer. You see their brand. So low involvement, it's like a 4-pack of pills. It's like just that will just tide you over. Do you get out of line and go hunt for the one you typically buy and then come back and have to stand in line again? Or do you say, oh, I'll just try this one this time? And you pitch onto the sliding counter their brand of 4 aspirin. Okay, so that is low involvement. It has no lasting effect. It doesn't hit you financially. It's just it's not worth the trouble to deliberate over it. Okay, high involvement is when it really makes a huge difference. This is when you're deciding on a health plan, or you're deciding on buying a new vehicle, or you're deciding on buying a new computer. You don't just go to the bargain basement for a lot of these things. You think about it, you research it, you see which ones are the best. Those are very high involvement on your part. Now, as an aside to this, I want to tell y'all something. And if you think about it, I just want y'all to not only be great marketers, to be cognizant consumers. Now, if you've ever noticed, or if you've worked in retail, if you go, let's say, for instance, I'll pick on somebody else this time, Walmart, and you're looking for Advil. And so you're going down the aisle, and eye level, what you see is their brand, usually. Their brand of aspirin or whatever it happens to be, or some company that they're in a partnership with. If you, for instance, I was hunting for a specific kind of Advil the other day. I like those little mini capsule gel ones because they're easy on the stomach. They're easy to take in your purse. They're just easy all the way around. Well, everything that was eye level was of course not that. So I looked around. I ended up having to get down on my all fours because it was on the bottom shelf towards the back because they want to make it disagreeable for you to purchase that brand because they want you to buy their brand. Now, this doesn't happen just in pharmacy. This happens in grocery stores. I'm really particular about my sugar that I purchase. I want either Imperial brand or, one of the name brands. I do not want the store brand because I always feel like it's not as granulated. It just doesn't melt as well. It just doesn't work as well in food. So, but if you next time you walk into any of the grocery stores and look eye level and look and see what sugar is actually at your eye level, the easiest to pick up, it's going to be their brand. So it's all about shelving. That's part of the way that they subconsciously drive you to buy what they want you to buy. They make it difficult to find. And if it's not all that important to you, you're going to pick up what's there. Unless you have a stubborn streak like me, where I just won't buy it. If they don't have it, I just won't buy anything. I'll go somewhere else. But most people will, buy what's available. And so some of the grocery stores are, providing less and less name brand and more of their brand. And the same thing goes with pharmaceuticals, all the different products. And it's all about how they are involving the consumer on a very subconscious level. Okay, now, when you look at that, so that's looking at, high risk versus high involvement versus low involvement. Other things can have a factor like brand loyalty. I don't know how many of you, well, I would say every single person has something that they're brand loyal to, that they're absolutely positive that the other companies just don't do it as well. So, like for instance, when I bought a pickup, there was no question in my mind I was getting a Ford, period, end of story. However, in Texas, I have an SUV that is a Chevrolet, but when it came to pickups, I absolutely wanted a Ford. So I have a lot of brand loyalty. Another brand loyalty that I've had over the years is JetBlue. When JetBlue flew into Long Beach, I would do anything I could to fly on JetBlue. I would fly through Boston or New York to get to Tampa, Florida, because I was determined to stay on JetBlue. Um, but you can also have the exact opposite. You can have anti-brand loyalty, and my example for that is that I will not fly American unless that is the only airline that goes into wherever I'm going, because American has kindly left me in Atlanta, in Detroit, in Dallas. I mean, I don't know what it is with American and me, but I always seem to be on routes that end up getting canceled or delayed or whatever. So I don't have any loyalty at all for American. I will fly them only if that's the only airline going there. But you have other brand loyalty too. You might be very loyal to your childhood physician. You might be very loyal to, a restaurant or to a barber or a beauty operator. We all have brand loyalties of some sort that we're not changing, period, end of the story. All right. As we look at some more examples of consumer decision making and high versus low, this chart's from your book, and it shows you the different types of decision making involvement. If you look in the upper left, you see that it's the decision making involvement when it's complex, when you're like trying to select a health insurance plan. It's extremely important. You're going to have to live this thing for at least a year. And it's very important, like do you want to be sure it covers, some particular extended chronic care that you have? Do you want to be sure, that the cost remains the same, that they can't bump the price in the middle of the year? All these different things. It's a very complex decision. You will probably do a lot of research. You will probably ask friends. You will look on different rating services before you make that decision. So very high involvement in the decision-making process. The routine one would be it's high, but it's brand loyalty. So you're more than likely not going to leave your primary care physician. If you're searching for another primary care physician, it still probably wouldn't be as complex as finding an insurance plan, because first thing you'd have to do is be sure they're carried under your insurance plan and then make some decisions based on that. Low involvement is when you're, like I was telling you, you're standing in line at Target, you need aspirin, you sure don't want to get back out of that line. So over-counter drugs, that's low involvement. Low involvement is deciding to buy, I don't know, Tic Tacs instead of, what's that, Altoids, where it doesn't have any major repercussions no matter what. And then the one that is routine and low would be something like Band-Aid. Most people are not particularly brand loyal to Band-Aids. You buy whatever's on sale, or you buy whatever creature is on there, or whatever it happens to be. So these are looking at examples of high and low involvement. Hang on a second. I've got a couple of chats in here. Be sure I don't ignore somebody. Okay. All right. So, all right. I'm going to stop there on chapter 3. Chapter 4. And see if does anybody have any questions about how important buyer, or show of hands, how many people have ever really thought about the decisions you make, like whether to buy, Altoids or Tic Tacs? Is it ever, did you ever realize that through your mind, all these, okay, good deal. I'm glad to see people raising their hands. Absolutely. You don't even realize on a daily basis how many decisions you make. The decision could be, do I want to go to Dr. Martinez's class, or do I want to not go and lose that 2 points and maybe miss out on something that can get me extra credit? What are every day you make decisions. Sometimes I sit at the red light as I'm coming out of the complex, and I think, oh, Do I want to go down PCH onto the traffic circle, which I detest, or do I want to turn left on Temple and go that way? Whatever it happens to be. I think that traffic circle is just an accident waiting to happen. I just don't even know how people drive like they drive.
No one knows how to
So
go around it.
you're right.
They
And
get
they
in the
don't use
wrong
their
lanes.
blinkers.
We must live by each other if you have to pull out and decide which way you're gonna go.
Exactly. We must live in the same proximity
Yeah,
because
for real.
every day it's a decision for me because I just know someone's going to hit me.
You're a
It's just,
PCH in Temple.
yeah, I'm in that area.
I'm PCH in Orizaba. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah, very close.
Very close. So, so yeah, it's, so you make decisions every day that you don't even consciously think about. You fuss as you're driving down PCH and you're going the speed limit. Somebody flies past you and makes your car shake doing, 70 miles an hour. Um, all these things are decisions that you make for whatever reason. Okay. All righty. Questions. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to show y'all now is I'm going to show y'all a video just talking about the strategic environment. And then I'm gonna send y'all off to your groups. So I'm gonna stop the recorder so that I don't have black spaces. Oh, I hate editing those films when those black spaces are in there.